Hello everybody, welcome back. This is the last and concluding section on Plato's Republic, Book 4. And I will focus in particular on the question of justice in Plato's conception of the right soul and the right city, the fair city, to use this expression. And raise some discussion question. I wish I could discuss it with you like face to face, but obviously that's not going to be possible. However, remember, you have a discussion section on Canvas, so you can use some of those ideas I'm going to throw at you and play with them, see what you can do, make sense of it. So let's go back to the point briefly, right, summarizing a little bit what is going on in Plato. In the Republic, particularly Book 4, Plato proposes his view about human nature. And to do this, he looks at the soul, which is the term that he uses, which is pretty much the same thing as what we call the mind, if you want, today, mental life, etc. The psyche. The Greek word for soul is psyche, which we use also in English anyway. And briefly to summarize, so a human soul has three parts, thinks Plato. He has made an argument about this. We went through it, so I'm not going to repeat it. Go back to previous videos and the PowerPoint if you want. A rational soul, which is that which allows you for human beings to understand things, to grasp meaning, to reason. That depends on the fact that we have language. And Plato is committed to the idea that only human beings have language. Two, what he calls a spirited soul. And the spirited soul is that which roughly corresponds to the willpower in us. The normal job of the willpower or spirit, or spirited soul, is to carry on the order and decrees of reason, a rational soul, and to impose them upon our third part of the soul, which is the appetitive soul, which means basically desires as well as emotions and feelings. Corresponding to this, we have, if we were to create a good society, we would have to create a society that fits this conception of human nature. Right? It would be at last a society that is not by convention, but by nature. It's to say, it's not just a relative to local mores, but rather a reflection, a social reflection of what it is to be a human being. Corresponding to the rational soul, you would have a class of leaders. Plato's term for it are the guardians. To go from one to the other, you have to take into account the virtues. It's consideration of the virtues that allows Plato to go from the macrocosm of the individual soul, to the macrocosm of a community, politically organized community, also known as the city, as you know. Since wisdom is the virtue that corresponds to the desire for knowing, for understanding, which is characteristic of the rational soul, then the best of the best, those of us who are most capable of searching for knowledge, should be placed in position of power. That is to say, they should be the leaders, they should be the guardians. A few number of people are like this. Next, to the spirited soul corresponds the virtue of courage. Now remember, courage, Plato has a special definition of courage. Courage is the ability to carry on the decrees of reason in the face of danger, as well as in the face of temptations. Being able to resist temptation and not being afraid of danger. That's courage. Those of us who have this trait as a dominant trait, we are going to educate them. Their education will not be intellectual, contrary to the leaders, right, the guardians. It will be essentially a sort of military education, physical training. Those of us who are spirited are those kids who care mostly for winning competitions. They want victory. They want to win. They want to finish first. They are active. They are physically active kind of people. Well, those people, we're going to train them with a sense of almost military military duty, so that they will be part of the class of what Plato calls auxiliaries, which corresponds to the soldiers as well as the law enforcers in the city. And then there remains the largest part of the population, those who are driven by their desire, by their appetites. Those people will not receive any education, neither intellectual nor even much of a physical education, except possibly the minimum for your health. The virtue that corresponds to this part of the soul is temperance. And we will try to instill this in those people as much as we can. Social class, they are the producers, says Plato. Producers mean basically all the people who take care of our needs. The food, the buildings, cooking, all those things. But now, watch out. That gives us three virtues, right? Wisdom, courage, temperance. However, Plato has announced that there are four cardinal virtues. There is a fourth one, which is justice. So what is justice? Well, for this you need to look at your text. It's going to be at 434 AB. So once again, it's page 120 here, and then you look at the numbers and the section number 434A. That starts here, like middle of the page. Socrates speaks first. Socrates. So from that point of view too, having and doing of one's own, of what belongs to one, would be agreed to be justice. Glaucon, that's right. So basically, you do what you are meant to do, what you are naturally gifted for. If it is to cook, you cook. If it is to build a wall, you build a wall. If it is to be a soldier, you become a soldier. If you are an intellectual and you search knowledge and want to understand, you will be trained precisely in those fields. And Plato mentioned in particular mathematics and geometry and philosophy as the key part of this kind of education. So Glaucon answers, that's right. Socrates. Now, see whether you agree with me about this. If a carpenter attempts to do the work of a shoemaker, or a shoemaker that of a carpenter, or they exchange their tools or honors with one another, or if the same person try to do both jobs, and all other such exchanges are made, do you think that does any great harm to the city? Glaucon, not really. Okay. What is characteristic of a carpenter and a shoemaker? They are producers. If they want to change their job, or even learn both, they do carpentry during the day and in the evening they make people's shoes, or something like this. No big deal, right? Because they remain within their class, even though their task is somewhat different. So the city will be just. Socrates. Now see whether you agree with me about this. If a carpenter attempts to do the work of a shoemaker or shoemaker... Oh, sorry. I skipped the page. Wrong section. So it's at A8. Socrates. But I imagine that when someone who is by nature... Notice the importance of the sentence by nature. I don't know if you notice it when you read the text, and I hope you read the text. Plato appeals to the expression, uses the expression by nature almost on every page of the text. Right? And it's the value of this text for a class called Theories of Human Nature. So someone who is by nature a craftsman or some other sort of moneymaker is puffed up by wealth or by having a majority of votes or by his own strength or by some other such thing and attempts to enter the class of soldiers. Or when one of the soldiers, who is unworthy to do so, tries to enter that of judge and guardian, and these exchange their tools and honors. Or when the same person tries to do all those things at once, then I imagine you will agree that these exchanges and this meddling destroy the city. So you got the point, I think. An unjust society is a society where people who should be leaders are in a position of basically being producers. And those who should be producers are trying to get into another social class. So the just city is just when each one does that which by nature he or she is meant to perform. Right? So justice is harmony, but harmony between different and unequal parts, both at the level of the soul and at the level of the city. Each part does what it's meant to do. As in a well-organized state, justice in an individual psyche emerges only from the proper relationship between the conflicting components of your soul. To get this, look at another important passage, which is going to be at 434 C7, so page 132, and go to the letter C, and then you see the numbers of the lines. Go to Socrates here. Again, it's about 2/3 down the page. Socrates speaks. And in truth, justice is, it seems, something of this sort. Yet, it is not concerned with someone's doing his own job on the outside. On the contrary, it is concerned with what is inside, within himself, really, and the things that are his own. It means that it does not allow the elements in him each to do the job for some others, or the third sort of elements in his soul to meddle with one another. A little historical comments here, or linguistic comments. So, in English, the word justice normally has mostly a political sense, and that's about it. In Greek, the word is dikaiosune. The word can be applied to an individual as well as to society. You can talk about a just person. Think about righteous, if you want. Right? The adjective works in both cases. It's hard to say just about an individual in English. In Greek, no problem. It applies both to an individual, particularly the soul, as well as to a society. So think justice, okay, or right, something like this. Both notions are kind of conveyed by the term dikaiosune, which we translate normally as justice. So, on the view that Plato exposes here, justice is a kind of good mental health for the individual and good social health for the city. This is attainable, thinks Plato, through the harmonious cooperation of the three powers of the soul. Let's go to the case of an individual. Remember the case of Leontius. Leontius is a case of injustice, like, in terms of his soul. His reason tells him, don't do something. His will tries to enforce the decree of his reason. But what happens is that the sphere of his desire actually overrides his reason. And he's in conflict with himself, right? He cannot resist. The power of his desires is stronger than his will and his intelligence. So Plato's problem here is the following. Under what condition can we have a hierarchy? If there is a hierarchy, it's not equality by definition. Right? And nevertheless, a hierarchy that is just. Politically speaking, the answer is, I think, clear. It has to be an aristocracy, not a democracy. Because in a democracy, it's the voice of the many that actually decides what the government is supposed to do. And that's wrong, thinks Plato. That leads to catastrophe. That leads to tyranny. That leads to people flattering and pandering the crowds. And taking positions of power essentially by lying to people, telling them whatever it is that they like to hear. A just society for Plato would actually have to be an aristocracy. Take the word aristocracy in its literal and etymological sense. Aristos means best in Greek. Right? So it's the government of the best. That means it's not inherited. Right? It's not because your daddy was the king that you're going to be the king. Or the leader here. It is because you deserve it. You deserve it because you have the kind of traits of character that can be plus, trait of character plus education, right? It's not just that you are born like this. Yes, you're born like this, thinks Plato. But on top of it, you need to be educated to develop those. Think about it as a capacity Everybody has capacities and abilities, but if you don't work on them, it's not going to happen. Right? Everybody more or less is able to play music, but if you don't practice, it's not going to go anywhere. So this aristocracy is not hereditary. It's an aristocracy of those who deserve to receive a particular kind of education. The problem with democracy, thinks Plato, is that it depends on the role of the majority. And on Plato's views, kind of pessimistic. Most of us are ruled by our desires, not by our reason. So this is going to lead to catastrophe, thinks Plato. So the ascendancy of a particular social group or part of the soul is linked to the dominant trait that defines your psyche. What are you driving? What is driving you? Desire to knowledge? Desire to understand? Desire to make sense? Then you can be educated to perform those kind of things at the best, and the wisest among the group of those who are going to be educated will end up being the true guardians, etc., for the other part of the soul. All right. So, a couple of comments, and I will finish with this. Comment number one. What do you think of this conception of justice? Remember, we have a discussion forum on Plato, and you should put a couple of your own ideas and respond to a couple of other students' comments or ideas or questions. Well, you may think, I'm going to throw some ideas at you, okay? You may think that there's a problem. Because Plato makes an assumption that is possibly questionable. The assumption is that people are stamped forever, for the rest of their lives, by a certain trait of character that they cannot escape. Well, that's not obvious. That's not obvious at all that people are like this. Maybe our life is much more plastic, much more malleable than this. Maybe someone who had heavy physical training and was a soldier developed intellectual curiosity that will make him a good leader. Why not? And vice versa. That also would be true for a producer. So maybe there's a problem with Plato's assumption that our nature is something fixed. Not that by nature you're like this, and that's it for the rest of your life. Second point of comments I would like to bring up is the virtue of temperance. As you know, this is what should rule basically the economy of the city, right? The producers, that's the economic sphere. Well, let's contrast it with modern capitalistic life. I know capitalism did not exist at the time of Plato. There was a slave society anyway. But nonetheless, should Plato come back and see our life, I think he would be shocked. Because the economy in large part consists, and this is the point of marketing after all, in creating desires in people, in telling them, okay, you need this shiny object, and if you don't, your life sucks. So that they're going to buy it. And of course they have it, and now they realize they didn't really want it, but the new object appears, new object appears, new object appears that you must have, must have, must have, must have. So the point of the economic consumerism is to feed constantly this desiring part of your soul, such that you always need something in order to be happy. At least that's what you think. And then you have it, you realize you're still not happy. On Plato's view, on the contrary, the economic sphere should be controlled such that people learn to be satisfied with what they have and live with it. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this last thought, and I will see you next week. We'll talk about human and animals. Bye-bye.